Listen Layer allows you to control your web analytics tracking and data collection in ways that were previously impossible. And with this, you can write a lot of powerful rules. But what if you overlook something, or you need to know when a new element exists on your website, or perhaps something breaks? That's where our monitoring feature comes in. And I'm going to walk through today a simple use case where you can receive a notification in your email when a particular customization in Listen Layer breaks, or in reality hasn't broken, it just doesn't cover a particular situation on your website. So if you're new to Listen Layer, make sure that you define your domain name and place your website script on all of the pages of your website. And then you'll need to jump to your listeners, and you'll need to find listeners for the applications that you use on your website and the user activity that you care about. Today, we're going to focus on the HubSpot Forms listener, which has already been enabled. And we've pre-built some of the customizations to help streamline the use case. If you are using another form system, you can apply these same things to that listener, as well as other listeners, for example, chat listeners or URL parameters. The sky is really the limit. Once you have a listener turned on, make sure you jump to the features section and check out the activity filters. These individual features push activity into the data layer. And those activities will always include an event as well as automatically collected information. So you can see here we have form submissions and form loads turned on for our HubSpot listener. And when a form is submitted, we would expect that this event will appear in the data layer automatically from this listener if everything is deployed correctly. Now also note that under the event settings screen, you can see a list of all of the events that are available in this listener, and these correlate to the various features under the activity filter. So in this case, we have also turned on a filter or a feature here called custom data layer values. And there are some other use cases you can dig into to learn more about writing custom rules, for example, categorizing your forms. And that's what we're going to look at today. We have built some categorization rules for our forms, and we would like to receive a notification if those rules don't cover a certain form or a certain use case. So once this is enabled, it allows me to create custom variables, which you can learn more about in some of those other use cases. And then allows me to write some rules that push values into those variables. And here's the rule that I care about today. What I've done is I have a few different forms on my site, and I want to categorize those forms. And so what I'm doing is I'm categorizing them based on the form ID as well as the form location where it's actually placed on the website. And when those conditions are matched, I push these certain values into the data layer. And in this case, I know that sometimes my marketing ops team or my webmaster or my development team might publish some new HubSpot forms that I don't necessarily know about. And so I've written a catch-all rule at the bottom here. So what happens is this table's read top to bottom, and if a rule is matched, it'll return the values. And if a rule is not matched, it'll continue down the table. And so if a brand new form is published on my website and I have no idea, then it's actually going to be caught by these two regular expressions here. And in my data layer, I'm going to get these values of unknown. So in my conversion tracking setup, I'm most likely sending this form category as a piece of information, like a property, into a tool like Google Analytics 4. Or I might also have individual LinkedIn conversion tags and individual Google Ads conversion tags for each of these categories. So every single one of my forms that is a content form will be labeled as content. But when a new form is published, I don't know what that is. And what I want to do is I want to receive a notification when the listener sees a form with this category so that I can, look at that notification in my email and I can take some action on it. In this case, I would go ahead and categorize the form. To do this, we're going to use a feature called data layer monitoring. And this is a feature of all of our listeners that allows you to monitor activity in your data layer and trigger notifications to yourself when certain conditions are met. Once this is enabled, you'll see a monitoring element here appear under the listener. And we can create rules. And so here I've already created a rule called unknown form notification. So let's go ahead and edit this. There's a place for a name and a description. I always recommend going back and documenting. But in this case, just for the sake of keeping things quick, we won't write out a description, but you could write something here like, sends myself a notification every single time an unknown form is submitted so that I can categorize that. And then I'm going to write some conditions. So the first one is kind of an overarching condition or action that you want to have taken when the condition is met. So do I care about this condition occurring, or do I care about the condition not occurring, for example? In this case, we care about the condition occurring. A situation where you would care about a condition not occurring is if you wanted to say, for example, I tend to get chats every day on my website. And so if I have a day where I don't have any chat activity, then I want to receive an email just to be notified of the low chat activity. And you select this option for that. But in this case, what we want to know is every single time a HubSpot form is submitted, so that's the event in the data layer, and one of my custom variables that I wrote a rule for over here in this custom values contains the word unknown, then I would like to receive a notification, because that essentially means that my custom rules don't have a specific categorization for this form. So when this condition is met, I want to send myself an email. Now you can send emails to any of the users that are on your account. So you can add additional users at any point in time to expand these notifications. You could send it to your web development team. You could, if you're managing analytics for multiple clients, you could set up a centralized email that's going to receive all of these notifications that somebody can monitor. And we can give our subject or give our email a subject. In this case, I've called that uncategorized form warning. And then we can actually build the body of our email. Now, the email that we're going to receive is going to have other information, such as our listen layer account ID and the actual listener that triggered this rule. And then there's a section inside the email where we can customize what we say. So it's good to maybe write ourselves a specific message that says, hey, this is the rule that triggered this, and this is what you need to do with that. So in this case, a new HubSpot form on your website isn't categorized. You could obviously be more detailed. You could say, you need to go into the website and categorize this. And I would recommend doing that, because if you're managing this, especially across multiple rules and multiple websites, you're going to want as much detail in here as you can get. Now, the really powerful thing is you can actually include details from the data layer itself. So you can insert the values of your custom variables or of the automatic variables that are collected in the data layer. In this case, we've gotten the form ID because we know in our HubSpot forms that the identifier is unique, and this is what we're going to be using for our rule. So I might as well put it in the email because it'll make it easy for me to take my next steps of solving the problem with my categorization. And then I like to always include what we have here is called origin path name, which is the origin of the URL plus the path. So this is basically the full URL without any URL parameters or anything like that, that the form was seen on. So then I can easily go find the form. So I'm going to save this rule. And I did make a small change there. So I'm going to just go ahead and publish this, and I'm going to say update rules. Maybe I'd give it a little bit more of a description. And here I have a test website where this listen layer script is running. So I'm going to just double check that everything is still connected. I'm actually going to refresh my Google Tag Manager preview just to ensure that I have the latest version of my workspace and that everything is fully connected. Okay, so here I'm back on Google Tag Manager, and we are going to kind of relaunch our preview. I'm going to make sure that it is connected fully, and I'm going to navigate to our test screen for our HubSpot forms. And you notice that we have all of these forms. And because I've set this up, I'm going to just go ahead and test something that I already know, which is that this particular form up here is not categorized. So if I go back to my custom values table, the form ID for that particular form is not in this table. And so it's going to return this unknown value. So the scenario here would be, like I said, if maybe your developer goes ahead and publishes a brand new form that you don't know exists, and therefore it wasn't properly categorized in your table, and you want to catch that as soon as you can so you can make sure you don't have data slipping through the cracks. And so when this page loaded, we'll notice that we have these HS form load events that occur. And I oftentimes have these turned on. This is a feature inside of this listener. Not only just to track form impressions and views, but so I can easily kind of debug and understand what forms are existing on a page. And here's this form that's categorized as unknown. And I'm going to go ahead and fill out that form. And you can see the form was submitted. And we have a new event in our data layer, HS form submitted. And we have this form category unknown. Well, those two elements match our monitoring condition. So we'll jump back to our monitoring condition and just kind of make sure this is clear, that what we cared about is that the form is submitted, the event is true, and that this custom variable called form category contains the value unknown. And now what should happen with this is we should actually see an email come to our email address with the notification. And obviously, in this case, I know to expect that this email is coming. But if you're monitoring this kind of on an ongoing basis, you're just going to see these randomly come in. So that's where I would recommend perhaps using a centralized email address, especially if you have multiple listen layer accounts that you're running for various websites or clients. And so I've just pulled up in my email, and we have a couple of these uncategorized form warnings because we were testing this earlier. And you can see this one just came in a couple minutes ago. And this is the email that Listen Layer sent me because it identified that, hey, there's this condition that was matched. And in this particular scenario, I know that the condition that matched basically means that this form is not properly categorized, and it's found on this page. So back in my message, when I was mentioning that this custom message just kind of appears as a section inside of the email, that is the bold text here, where we kind of list out the various elements that you've included. But automatically we'll include information like, the name of the rule that was triggered, the account ID, for example, if you do have multiple listen layer accounts, the name, which can change, but the ID doesn't change. And some of this other information like the rule ID, for example. And in this case, I didn't have a rule description, but if I did have the rule description, that would appear here, which might allow me to have this customized message contain, less information. So in this case, now I can take some action. I know that something is essentially broken or that my rules are not covering a particular use case. So I'm going to grab that form ID and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add a row. I'm going to move it above my catch-all rule and I'm going to paste in this form ID. Now, in this case, I don't know exactly, where this form lives. Maybe it lives on multiple pages. Maybe it does something different on the pages. I might reach out to my dev team or my marketing ops and say, hey, what's up with this form? What is this for? Is this a contact? Is this a demo form? In this case, I find out that it's a demo form. I find out that it doesn't matter which page it's on. It's going to be on lots of different pages. So I'm going to put a regular expression in here. And I'm going to call this my main demo form in footer. And I'm going to save it. And now what's going to happen is when I publish my changes, we're going to see our rules update for this particular form. So let's do a hard refresh just to make sure clearing out any of our old information. And we will submit this form again. And then on the HS form submitted event, we'll notice now that our form category does not contain unknown anymore. It contains demo. This is just a quick example of how you can use the monitoring feature. The more customizations you add to your tracking, or the more critical variables or pieces of information you want to keep track of, or even just kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of your website activity, the more this monitoring feature becomes very useful. We encourage you to jump in, create a free Listen Layer account, and start using these cool features, and then let us know about the awesome stuff that you build.